Good evening, everyone. It's now 6 p.m. in the Eastern Caribbean, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this roundtable discussion organized by Caribbean Evaluators International. For those of you who are not familiar with CEI, the organization began in 2014 and is registered in Jamaica. I am Susan Branker Greene, and I will be moderating this session. I am the Vice President of the Caribbean Evaluators International. Just a little bit about CEI before we kick things off. We work for the Caribbean, where M&E is seen as integral to enhance development initiatives and is used by all entities to improve programming and policies. We are a network of monitoring, evaluation, and development professionals focused on advancing evaluative practice in the Caribbean. We provide thought leadership, professional development, peer learning, and contributions to regional and international discourse on monitoring and evaluation from the Caribbean perspectives and from our experiences here in the Caribbean. And in addition, we provide platforms and opportunities such as this to share and exchange on good practice. Members of the CEI volunteer their time, their energy, and knowledge to drive our three strategic priorities, namely engaging and supporting our membership and their professional development, creating visibility for the CEI in the Caribbean region, and advocating for quality monitoring and evaluation practice in the region. Our president is Valerie Gordon, and she leads the board of 10 members. Now, this evening's activity is part of gLOCAL Evaluation Week, which runs from today, the 31st of May, until the 4th of June, which is on Friday. Hopefully you would have seen the full slate of events that CEI has planned. If you haven't, please visit any of our social media handles. We're certainly on LinkedIn and on Instagram and Twitter. So please feel free to visit any of those social media sites for updates on this week's events. This week is really about sharing knowledge and networking, and the CEI has joined with similar organizations around the world to participate in this gLOCAL Evaluation Week. And we were part of the first gLOCAL Evaluation Week, which was held last year. Now, this evening's session will be focused on exploring the demand and supply for M&E in the Caribbean region, and we'll certainly consider how regional development decision makers employ M&E in their programming processes, and certainly what adaptations, if any, will be required to meet the demands of M&E in a post-COVID-19 and certainly a crisis era such as this. Certainly some of the questions that come to the fore are focused around what new approaches and formats, if any, will be required, and how evaluators prepare themselves for these changes. Undoubtedly, questions emerge about how is M&E perceived in the Caribbean region, and who demands and support monitoring and evaluation in the Caribbean, and quite interestingly, why do they demand and support monitoring and evaluation? Another question, will COVID-19 make monitoring and evaluation more or less mainstream in the Caribbean context? And as I mentioned before, what can and should evaluators be doing differently in a post-COVID crisis environment? So we have 4 distinguished panelists. Those are just some of the questions that have naturally emerged as we were contemplating the design of this session. And we have 4 distinguished panelists, each of whom brings a unique perspective. Each panelist has 15 minutes to present on this very thought-provoking subject of demand and supply of M&E in the Caribbean. And I will introduce the first panelist. Please note in terms of housekeeping that your mics have been muted. We ask you kindly to place any comments or questions in the chat, or those of you who want to pose your question directly to the panelists. We will open up for question and answers after all the panelists have made their presentations. So please do keep note as we go on. And as you would have heard, or those who have just joined, the session is being recorded. I have great pleasure in introducing our first panelist, Ambassador Manorama Soeknandan, who is the Deputy Secretary General at the CARICOM Secretariat in Georgetown, Guyana. Ambassador Dr. Soeknandan is since February 2014, the Deputy Secretary General of CARICOM. She has, among other areas, the strategic management, monitoring and evaluation, project management, development of the CARICOM strategic plan in her portfolio. She is the chair of the CARICOM Regional Leadership Group, and this is a position she's held since 2016. She's also served as the ambassador from Suriname to Guyana, CARICOM, Cuba, and Jamaica before becoming the Deputy Secretary General. She has conducted several studies, among which law and international studies and diplomacy, international trade, and global governance. Ambassador, you are invited to share your presentation. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mrs. Gordon, President of CEI, Mrs. Susan Branker Greene, Vice President, Mr. Tobias, Ms. Smith, and Mr. Pedro Souza. And thank you, CEI, for inviting me to give a small presentation, and also a very good evening to all the participants. I'm delighted to be here so I can share with you what the CARICOM Secretariat is doing within the Secretariat, but also in the community, including in regional institutions, the CARICOM regional institutions, and the member states. So, well, I joined in 2014. We had have the Strategic Management Unit, and what was the experience? That all the planning was activity-based, and you could not trace back to what was being changed or how it impacted stakeholders. The silo approach, no interlinkages, you still have a lot of duplication and triplication of activities without achieving the desired results. Information about projects, programs, and IDPs, it's often secret. It's not being shared with the CARICOM Secretariat, neither with other member states. IDPs are also reluctant to share information. There is no results-oriented culture, although there is a lot, many complaints about the implementation deficit. I think all of us are familiar with it. It's coming from several corners. I don't have to hide that for you. And also within the Secretariat, as long as I knew the Secretariat, the work program and the budget, a few hundred pages. But I must say we have made a big change now, and the high paper consumption has really lessened with what we are doing now. So we started in 2014, and we said, you know, you cannot focus on a plethora of actions, and these actions are all over the place. You cannot connect them. You need to streamline the activities towards achieving efficient and accountable, transparent results. All processes towards the result must be transparent, traceable, and whether it's for politicians, IDPs, or the electorate, these must be held accountable and responsible for achieving or not achieving the results. Okay, so, and the results must be measured in an objective and independent way. That is very important. Good governance requires transparency, accountability, and you need evidence-based data. And evidence-based data is also important to make decisions, to implement those decisions. And to get information about priorities in the respective member states, of course, we also had to visit member states and see the strategic plans, development plans, and all those kinds of things. Now, this is what it comes to actually. And I'm sure you are all familiar with it. We are heavily activities-based, and not that activities are not important, activities are important, but we have to look at the results. What do you need to do to achieve the results so that you can bring the change, not only for an institution or for the government, but for the people? And what will the change impact? How will it impact our people? So, and to do that, you need continuously, I'm saying not frequent, but continuously you have to monitor, you have to evaluate, and you have to assess the risk. If you do not do that on a continuous basis, you cannot achieve the results. Timely intervention to mitigate any risk that might come your way is very important. And that's why you have this cycle. And this cycle, I'm sure, is known to all the practitioners of monitoring and evaluation. Now, what we did in the Secretariat, we developed a two-phase project, okay? And the title of the project was Managing for Development Results, Furthering the Regional Integration Agenda. The first phase was with the support from the CDB. We visited all member states, and we got assistance from Bastel consultants from Canada. We established the CRLG, that's the Caribbean Regional Leadership Group. It was actually established the 29th of July 2016, so soon we're going to be 5 years old. And it comprised of all representatives from all the CARICOM member states, 23 CARICOM regional institutions, representatives from the internal directorates within the CARICOM Secretariat, and the CRLG is led by the DSG and our, I must say, technical experts within the SMU. Okay, we cannot do it without these highly, I would say, specialized technical experts within the Strategic Management Unit, which is within the CARICOM Secretariat. So we then developed these CARICOM gender-sensitive results-based management system, which also included the development of the community logic model and performance measurement framework with indicators owned by all implementing partners. The RBM system also includes a risk management program. We also have a risk officer within the CARICOM Secretariat now dealing with risk. All of this resulted in a first CARICOM Results Focus 2018 report. And I must mention that not all internal stakeholders were happy with the reflection percentage-wise of the results. And this was also the first time that we had such a report. Now, what I have mentioned, I've told you that we visited all the member states. We spoke with several stakeholders, with politicians, with media, youth, agriculture people, cross-cutting. And after having done that, then we got the political buy-in or the commitment from our CARICOM heads of government and the Community Council. So at the 18th special meeting in 2018, the heads of government agreed and mandated that all CARICOM regional institutions, organs, and bodies should adopt RBM practices which are geared towards promoting a result-oriented culture. And of course, this means a mind shift, all true, okay? And the Community Council, that's the ministers from Foreign Affairs responsible for community affairs, they also mandated in January 2019 that all member states should adopt the RBM approach. So because of Jamaica's experience, we signed an MOU with Jamaica, and Jamaica is providing assistance to the CARICOM Secretariat and also to other member states. And I will tell you about the pilot projects that we have. So Jamaica already has some experience, and they are sharing the experience of how to adopt a whole of government approach to RBM, which obstacles you might have and how to deal with those things. And it is a similar approach what Australia had in the late 1980s. So we already have some best practices. With the support from the EU, we also completed a model national RBM policy and adaptation guide for adoption at the national level. Also, the operationalization of the CARICOM RBM monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. We call it CARPH's database web platform. And we have more regional institutions and member states coming on board in the CARPS. So they are putting in the data. Now, phase 2 is, I told you phase 1 was with the CDB. Phase 2 is with the support, especially technical support from the World Bank, IEG, CLEAR, and LUC. And here we have 7 interventions over a 6-year period. We want to have the adoption of the RBM policy by all implementing partners. We want to execute the CARICOM MER web platform by all implementing partners, advanced training and capacity building, establishment of a CARICOM network of RBM professionals, CRNP, and strengthen the existing CRLG, develop a postgraduate curriculum for RBM and M&E, and here we are strongly thinking and of the view that CEI should play a role here. Support the implementation of the CARICOM regional strategy for the development of statistics to assist in improving monitoring and measurement of results. As I told you, evidence-based results is crucial. So statistics is very important. Okay. So what does it come out to? What does all of this lead to what I have told you? M&E and risk assessment and reporting. You can do institutional evaluation. You can have major projects and program. You can have at the policy implementation capability level, you can do evaluation, monitoring, reporting, risk assessments. You can conduct surveys on public satisfaction with major policy measures and administrative services. You can evaluate major policy measures and programs. You can also evaluate, and mention was made of COVID and the aftermath of COVID. How are we doing conducting business differently? So you can also evaluate of government innovation efforts, and we can even go at the ministry level. This is how far we can go, okay? So be it the Ministry of Health, be it the Ministry of Education. Those two right now are really focused ministries. What are we doing with health? What are we doing with education? So we have to share the information with whom? With the beneficiaries. So with governments, IDPs, because they provide the funding, they need to know what is going on, but also the public at large, the electorate. And of course, they need to know if their tax money is being spent well. Okay, so there I've mentioned accountability, responsibility, being transparent. Okay, so the public at large, the electorate, also has a responsibility and also has certain rights to know of what is going on. And where we should be heading is that our people should hold not only IDPs, ministries, and so on, but also governments responsible. How responsible enough are they in dealing, in spending taxpayers' money? Okay, do they achieve what they promise? And this is the sensitive part when it comes to monitoring and evaluation, because we are all aware that politicians often do not like that our people know if they really have achieved the results or not. So everything is being kept a secret. And that's why this thing called evidence-based data is also very important. Okay, so if we don't go this direction, I personally do not think we will change the way we conduct business in our region. If we really want to have change, and if we want to have evidence-based change, monitoring, evaluation, risk assessment is crucial, and we have to hold each other responsible. Finally, I'll give you one example. We had a 9th EDF program for the region funded by the EU, okay? And we had more than €1 million that had to go back. Now we had another 10th EDF due to monthly monitoring, evaluation, risk assessment, and bringing the stakeholders together from member states, and not one stakeholder. Okay, we have to invest money in bringing 3 stakeholders from each member state together. We were able to increase tremendously the implementation rate of the 10th EDF, okay? And if I tell you the amount of money due to administration costs that went back, you can laugh about it. It's almost nothing compared to more than 1 million that went back after the 9th EDF. So just to tell you that a silo approach and being secret about things and so on is not helping us. We must be transparent, we must be open. Monitoring, evaluation is crucial, risk mitigation is crucial, and we have to work together. If we do not work together and we have the elbow mentality, we will not succeed in our region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for sharing those very instructive insights with the CARICOM Secretariat's experience in cultivating results-oriented culture. You certainly underscored something that is familiar to many of us in the Caribbean, the implementation deficit that we often face, and that there is really a need for a shift in mindset to ensure that when we speak of good governance, we recognize that underpinning good governance is evidence-based data and having evidence for decision-making. Your points with respect to a whole government approach and certainly recognizing accountability, responsibility, and transparency as key were well noted, Ambassador, and thank you for that very poignant example of the difference you saw with the 9th EDF in terms of the implementation rate versus the 10th EDF, when there was greater mainstreaming of M&E practice under the 10th EDF. And of course, with that, some risk management and planning done, and certainly removing some of the silos to allow for greater alignment and coordination. So I think that example certainly has set an excellent tone for us to understand how the adoption of results orientation within government will pay enormous dividends for the Caribbean region and certainly beyond. So thank you very much, Ambassador. Our next panelist is Kervyn Tobias, and Kervyn has been, sorry?
I think we have a question in the chat.
Yes, but we will hold those questions until after all the speakers have finished. So just hold that thought, just pin it, and we will come back to that question. Thanks very much. Kervyn Tobias has been head of monitoring and evaluation with the OECS Commission for the past 2 years. He possesses a Master's of Science degree in Information Systems from the University of Southampton in the United Kingdom, and a Bachelor's of Science in Computer and Management Studies from the University of Technology in Jamaica. He has held various senior positions within the government of St. Lucia, including Assistant Controller with the Inland Revenue Department, Manager of the Information Technology in the Ministry of Finance, and Project Coordinator, Public Sector Modernization within the Department of the Public Service, and has overseen the implementation of major computer-based systems throughout government. He has also served as a St. Lucia's country-based specialist with the OECS eGRIP, leading the implementation of e-filing and e-payment systems in 3 OECS territories. Kervyn, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suzanne. Good evening, fellow panelists. Good evening, all participants, everyone joining this discussion. And it is indeed a privilege to be here to have the opportunity to share with you just some of the work and the experiences of the OECS Commission in the area of monitoring and evaluation. I will go ahead and project some slides to give some visual reference while I speak. Okay, yes, so The mandate, just for background information, the mandate of the OECS Commission includes advancing, supporting, and accelerating economic growth and social integration, as well as promoting equity and social inclusion. M&E in our region requires a cultural shift, which the OECS Commission is strategically placed to promote, initiate, and support. The OECS is an 11-member grouping comprising member states of Antigua and Barbuda, Commonwealth of Dominica, Grenada, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And then we have the British Virgin Islands, Anguilla, Martinique, and Guadeloupe as associate members of the OECS. So I would say at the OECS, we recognize M&E is essential in order to design appropriate, effective, and measurable programs and projects, and to consistently and effectively monitor implementation and evaluate the impact of specific interventions. Sorry, yeah, the slide hesitated for a while, sorry about it. Yes, so our countries, as is the case with most of the developing world, we are heavily reliant and dependent on donor financing, whether it's in the form of development loans or grants. Most donors then, as part of their due diligence, and I would guess also influenced by their past experiences, whether it be misappropriation of funds, etc., have found it necessary to institute measures to mitigate against such practices. And so M&E features almost as a staple in most agreements. It is not only to ensure appropriate use of funds, but also serves to increase the chances of those persons who are supposed to benefit from project funds actually receive those benefits. So we can say this was basically our regions through the donors enforcing it or requiring it. This was basically our region's introduction to monitoring and evaluation. Then there is the obvious donor reason behind M&E, which has to do with their reporting to their own top-level management, right? And the countries which provide these funds. So we should say that M&E should not be, or this is what we are preaching right now within the Commission, that M&E should not only be done because it's a requirement of the donor. We should take a page from them and see the value of it and of having such information readily available to guide our decisions from the strategic level down. It also would guide us in terms of how we plan and approach our work. The intention at the end for us is to make everyone responsible for the work that they do, and also to ensure that reports are timely and as detailed as necessary, and that people are able to speak on project programs at any point in time, including the impacts realized. So in the OECS, we speak about the M&E mindset. And when speaking about that, we speak about taking a proactive approach to monitoring and evaluation, expecting that this will result in better, quicker, easier access to information, data, statistics to help secure financing or donor funding, better, easier, quicker access to information for strategic planning, decision-making. So we are focusing on results and then how the activities contribute to getting us to those results, which is almost the reverse of where we've been coming from in terms of the high emphasis, high focus on activities and being busy. By doing so, we would support better planning and decision-making, support learning and knowledge exchange. We would gather critical information for us to provide reports of value, not just what we have been busy doing, but rather in terms of what difference it has made to our region, to our member states, to our citizens, and to provide accountability to funders, citizens, and other relevant stakeholders. This graphic provide some details. This provides a graphic in terms of you know, the work of the OECS and leading up to the benefits to member states, which ultimately this is what we exist for, and this is what we work towards. And providing details on benefits to member states on initiatives we are implementing on their behalf is very important to us at the OECS Commission. Further, our heads of state require such information to keep their citizens informed of how their contributions are being spent, as well as how donor funds, which we know would have been well publicized, are changing their lives for the better. So just some of the challenges that we experience, and there are many, but I've just highlighted a few key challenges that come up very regularly. And the commitment, M&E, and especially evaluation, has not been treated as a priority in the past by our people. We've either been too busy implementing activities during the project, or our priority then after the project moves to chasing after new money from donors to see how we get to the next project, right? The lack of M&E skills, and that's another one that we struggle with a lot. There's a lack of M&E skills amongst our people. It's always difficult to recruit experienced M&E personnel from amongst our member states. We have the option of perhaps going outside to the more developed countries, but then the cost becomes a bit prohibitive. Money, and I'll speak a bit on this one because it's one issue that we're constantly battling with, even above the others now. And the reality in our region is that we are very dependent on donor financing again to undertake the development activities, especially those that are not immediately crucial. When it's crucial, then we scrape up from the government some money to do something, but those where we see the long-term impacts, the money is not immediately available. So impact outcome summative evaluations need to take place after project implementation. And then at that time, project finances are either exhausted or what's left has been returned to the donor, right? And with no access to the monies, specifically earmarked for evaluation, then it would most likely never happen. And that's what we're seeing most of the time. I mean, up to last week, we had a project and we were wondering, how do we undertake evaluation? And the donor's response is that you undertake evaluation before the end of project, which is not the ideal. But this is our reality and this is what we have to work with. Now, asking member states to put up the money, they just don't see it as a priority. So then, and the finances are limited. So to put finances into measuring impact of a project that has already wrapped up, it is a challenge trying to convince member states of this. The perception, M&E is often viewed as a risk of embarrassment. We tend to think about what it will expose, what evaluation will expose, or how we will look after, rather than considering the opportunities to learn from the findings and to become better implementers. So these are just some of the challenges that we face, along with monitoring, getting reliable data, stakeholders participation, dedicated people on the ground to do data collection, to participate and support the monitoring functions, etc. So moving along and looking at M&E in our evolved environment, right? We pursuing vigorously the institutionalization of M&E policies at the member states level. We have already made some steps in terms of having policy approved and adopted at the OECS Commission level. We're looking at establishing the OECS Commission as a successful model for effective M&E, a model that we could replicate or have member states emulate. And sensitization training, hand-holding. This is a lot of what is needed in the member states to sort of get them on board, to get them to move away from the culture of, I would almost want to say flying blindly, to something more focused and on results and impact. Developing templates that could be easily adopted, and we're speaking about templates in terms of log frame templates, M&E plan templates, indicator reference sheet templates, even in terms of tools that would facilitate easy gathering of data, ease of analysis of the position that any project is at any one point in time, and ease of reporting. We're looking at leveraging the OECS Commission's influence as a grant agent, and the OECS is pursuing several grant accreditations to become a grant agent. And that this would put us in a very advantageous position in terms of making M&E a requirement for receiving grants and to more or less coax member states into moving in that direction. Okay, I'm not sure of the time, but I'll quickly wrap up.
5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Yes.
Oh, thanks. Well then, I have some time. Okay, appreciating where we are with M&E in our region, I think it can almost be considered a beneficial position, since we are still in the process of introducing M&E. With the whole pandemic and the changes in our lives, as I have here, our evolved environment, you know, it puts us in the position where we don't have to deal with the challenge of changing the way that we do M&E. I don't know if it's really a benefit, because we haven't gotten to the point of having M&E, you know, really become part of our operations. So we could take a step back and tweak how we adapt our approach to M&E upfront, so that we could incorporate strategies to deal with crises, which may derail implementations and require rethinking of our framework. So we deal with that upfront, and in the end, what we institute could be something which is more agile, more flexible, more able to move and change around as our environment changes, as we face crises. We don't know what is coming in our region. We have had COVID, we have had volcano in St. Vincent. We're entering hurricane season. So, you know, we have this upfront that we could look to see how best we could adapt and overcome whatever comes our way. Okay, so also we've been looking at finding new ways of verifying, and this was immediate as soon as the COVID crisis hit, because our projects would have had missions budgeted where M&E personnel would go into the countries to conduct verification visits. This was no more. So then we started looking at virtual visits, virtual verification. And this hopefully has helped in emphasizing the need for having automated information systems to hold critical data. Having systems that are properly backed up. And hopefully through our experience, has accelerated the implementation of such systems.
You have 1 minute.
Oh, thank you. So I will end with this graphic, which I found paints a perfect picture of why we need M&E, why we need evaluation. And the graphic speaks for itself. We take this as representative of the confusion in results, which is what we want to avoid. We have one program in 2 locations with 2 very different results. And M&E is all about getting us to catch this up front before we get to the end of the project, that we make the changes as we implement to ensure that the results that we're aiming for are where we land. So let's make it work for us as we move towards a more focused, streamlined, and effective ways of doing things. And as we say at the Commission, this is an essential part of our recipe to ensure that we are successfully fulfilling our mandate. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kervyn. So many takeaways yet again. Certainly, I found a consistent message as would have been shared by Ambassador, and that is the importance of that shift in mindset and you know,
Yes.
that culture shift. And I think that certainly needs to be underscored, that certainly from an OECS Commission's perspective, this is also of great relevance. And your point about the donor financing or grants, provision of grants by donors, really have driven a lot of the demand and support for monitoring and evaluation in the Caribbean context, because M&E is a staple in most agreements, as you rightfully would have shared. And I was very pleased, and I'm sure the participants are very pleased to learn that the OECS is being very intentional about making M&E part of its DNA. And I think you went as far as to suggest that OECS is working towards being a successful model for monitoring and evaluation for replication by member states. And I think that certainly should be applauded. I know the OECS Commission, as the Ambassador would have mentioned before we even got started this afternoon, mentioned that the OECS Commission and the CARPHA, who we're going to hear from next, are both part of the regional work that is being done to shift the culture. But certainly also wanted to note some of the efforts that you are making towards shifting the mindsets. You spoke about planning and learning and accountability, certainly not only to funders, but as well to citizens, and information for reporting. What Kervyn was particularly interested in was your reference to the challenges, number of which would have resonated with me, as I believe would have resonated with a number of our participants. The issue of commitment, of course, is real in terms of implementation. Very often project teams dive straight into implementation, and it's only in the last few weeks that somebody remembers that there was something called M&E on a budget line.
Yes.
I was not surprised, but want to make a plug. You made mention of skilled personnel, and I'm pleased to let you know that the Caribbean Evaluators International provide a wealth of experienced M&E professionals. We have a mentorship program being launched shortly that will help to cultivate new and emerging evaluators as well, so we can close that gap, because I've heard it time and again that there are not many skilled personnel, and we are working to ensure that we strengthen the capacity here in the region to provide the types of services that the OECS Commission and its member states need. You mentioned a third challenge is money. Yes, that's great news. Money, of course, is a big one for all of us. You know, where are we going to find the money to do it? Should we use this money for something else rather than spending money on an evaluation for a project that's already done? Of course, very often there's not the learning lens that is used, but rather, you know, this was just ticking a box. And of course, the perception. And I think this was quite a major one for me, Kervyn, the risk of embarrassment. There is so much fear of evaluation in particular, but even monitoring. There is the fear of embarrassment. There's a fear that I will be seen as not doing as well as I'm expected to do. And therefore, there's a lot of resistance to it. So Kervyn, I think we have gotten so much practical insights from you, as even in terms of how the recent COVID pandemic plus the volcanic eruption in St. Vincent would have forced the Commission to think about how it is doing things, and particularly in terms of monitoring and having virtual validation of data. So thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences. And I'm sure that we have generated quite a lot. I'm seeing a lot in the chat, so we'll come back to that. Okay, thank you again. I'm pleased to introduce you to our next panelist, who is Patricia Smith Cummings. And Patricia is a Belizean national, a monitoring and evaluation professional with over 10 years of experience. In her capacity as M&E specialist at the Caribbean Public Health Agency, she has demonstrated skills in providing M&E technical assistance regionally and nationally to strengthen M&E systems to enable effective evidence-based public health interventions, programs, and policies. Previously, she has served as the chair for the Caribbean Monitoring and Evaluation Technical Working Group for Health, and currently serves as the CARPHA technical lead for M&E on the technical working group. Ms. Smith Cummings, functioned as M&E specialist for 2 years at the National AIDS Commission Secretariat in Belize, and she holds a bachelor's degree in business management from the University of Belize and is pursuing a master's degree in development statistics at the University of the West Indies, and she's already at the thesis stage. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Over to you, Ms. Cummings, I'm sorry.
A pleasant good evening. That's okay, thank you. And thanks also for the opportunity to be able to share our experiences from the Caribbean Public Health Agency. And we look forward to continued engagement in this process. With all protocols observed, I would like to share my presentation now. One moment, please. Okay, good. So thank you very much. This evening provides me the opportunity to share a little bit about the demand and supply for monitoring and evaluation in the Caribbean region, and to look at some key questions or key components that would support strengthening M&E in the region and addressing and look at different methodologies or approaches that could be used to build capacity. One of the first things that we talk about when we talk about monitoring and evaluation is exactly how does M&E contribute to the process of development decision making, or how does it contribute to decision making at all levels, regardless if it is at the programmatic level, if it's examining interventions, or if it is looking at the higher level in regards to policy and the effects or the impact of those policies. From our experience and within the Caribbean region, I have outlined the Caribbean regional frameworks that have facilitated or that have allowed monitoring and evaluation to be, I would say, embedded or to be entrenched and established within the Caribbean region, especially I will say in the area of health. One of those main frameworks is the Caribbean Cooperation in Health 4 that looks at developing and providing regional public goods for sustainable health development within the Caribbean region. The second one is the Caribbean Regional Strategic Framework for HIV and AIDS. And this, of course, is the regional strategy that addresses how the Caribbean region will address and respond to the HIV needs, and to ensure that the strategies that have been put in place are clearly outlined and articulated, both for the importance at the regional level, but also at the national level. Another one of those frameworks is, of course, the strategic plan for the Caribbean community. And DSG has already referenced this, so I really won't go much into it. But this, of course, is also one of our regional frameworks that guides the work that happens in the region. And then finally, at the level of the Caribbean Public Health Agency, the pathway to 2025, which is CARPHA's or roadmap, I would say, and our strategic plan of how CARPHA, as a regional public health agency within the Caribbean, as a CARICOM institution, carries out the mandates that have been identified for the agency. And I say this, and I have identified these regional strategies really to say that it is very, very important for monitoring and evaluation to be supported and also to be enabled. And when I say supported, I also mean financially supported, and to create an enabling environment for monitoring and evaluation at the highest level, be it at the institutional level or at the highest level of government. This is important because it positions monitoring and evaluation in an important place and shows and solidifies the role that monitoring and evaluation can play in helping institutions, government, to be able to respond to development challenges, in knowing exactly where we are, what progresses that we've made, and what changes need to occur to effect the change that we need to have. I'll just go a little bit into one of these frameworks. And this is the governance framework for the Caribbean Corporation in Health. And it outlines and serves as, I would say, as a good role model of a functional mechanism that has embedded monitoring and evaluation into its process. If you look at the bottom of the graphic, it starts at the national and the regional implementing agency that looks at member states and CARICOM regional institutions, and also, of course, our partners in health. There is the Caribbean Corporation in Health Secretariat that includes CARPHA, PAHO, and CARICOM. And at that level, you would note that there is a monitoring and evaluation working group, which is the Caribbean Monitoring and Evaluation Technical Working Group for Health, which is a part of this mechanism, in which is a governance mechanism. So it clearly places monitoring and evaluation in a position whereby it can contribute to the process and is a part of the functional mechanism to address and to provide information and data that is required to provide information as it relates to the progress that we've made towards the achievement and the priorities of the Caribbean Corporation in Health. Other existing mechanisms, I've outlined some of them there, but for the CRSF, which is the Caribbean Regional Strategic Framework for HIV and AIDS, there is a PACC, which is a Priority Areas Coordination Committee, and the Monitoring and Evaluation Technical Working Group, which also sits under the PACC and provides that M&E technical guidance and support to the members of the PACC, which is, of course, again, another governing body of the region in response to HIV and AIDS. DSG also mentioned the CRLG, which is the CARICOM Regional, the RBM Leadership Group. There's also the CARICOM Virtual Pillar Groups, which are also functional mechanisms in which M&E has been built into, in able to respond to the various needs and to ensure that we are exactly where we need to be in regards to both not only monitoring, but evaluating the outcomes. And finally, at the level of the institution of CARPHA, there is support both institutionally and as it relates to having persons that are able, with the capacities that are able to carry out M&E functions, but also CARPHA also has a programmatic component to monitoring and evaluation that has over the years supported member states as it relates to M&E capacity building, be it basic and advanced training, M&E technical support that has been provided to over 16 plus countries, and in some instances, as through regional initiatives have benefited all of the 26 CARPHA member states. We've also provided mentorship and supportive supervision to CARPHA member states over the years. As it relates to M&E demand and the supply, you know, one of the questions that was posed, and I was hoping that one of my panelists, fellow panelists, would address this in a different way than I would. But it looks at how do we adapt to a post-crisis era. And to be very honest, this was a bit of a challenge for me because I understood the post-crisis era, but for me, I could not understand why the post-crisis era, because for me, M&E matters now, and now is the important time. So it is good to have certain strategies, I would say, or things that we would be able to learn from, that we could say we could apply post crisis or later on as we progress. But the importance and the relevance of M&E must be demonstrated at this time now, when it is important to both identify, to determine, and to improve development outcomes during the pandemic. So it is important for us to matter now and to be responsive now. M&E needs, as it has to be, is needed to determine also how the impact of the pandemic has affected the development outcomes of the Caribbean community. I had outlined all those strategic frameworks, and those are plans that maybe we've had from, of course, developed years ago in some instances, but we need to sit down and examine, or in some cases, re-examine the impact of the pandemic and the reality based on the situation, including the economic situation that has affected both countries and institutions, and how this has affected our ability to be able to achieve the things that we've identified that we need to achieve in those frameworks. Also, as it relates to decision and policymakers, they need M&E information now, because the decisions that have to be made must be made now, and we need to ensure that there is adequate information to be able to make the right decision. As it relates to new M&E approaches, and how as evaluators or M&E professionals do we prepare, or what is it that we need to do to meet these new challenges? I mean, new challenges even that have been brought about as a result of the pandemic. And I've identified a few here, if you would allow me, that looks at re-examining the theories of change.
5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. So re-examining the theories of change. Theories of change have been developed pre-COVID. These need to be revisited. And in some instances, because of the impact of the pandemic, these also have to be, I would say, made some changes to ensure that we are still able to achieve what we had outlined in the beginning. We need to also promote evaluation practices and look at using and incorporating mixed method approaches into our evaluations. We need to better utilize data visualization to communicate messages and results, and to also strengthen analytical skills. And this is something that I've seen over the years, and through engagement with many in M&E field in both member states, that the analytical skills is something that we definitely need to build and to strengthen. Also to incorporate applied research into evaluation practice. That is one of the other approaches that could be used. I think also one of the things that we have to, I would say, come to some agreement on is that there can no longer be, even if there were, a separation between monitoring, evaluation, research, and statistics. Because especially even in the time of COVID-19, it is important for these to come together so that we are able to have the needed information to inform our responses. As it relates to voluntary organizations, professionals, what is it that can be done to address M&E gaps within the region? And some of these, I've identified about 6 of them here, including fostering and strengthening a culture of evaluation within the Caribbean region. I think in the Caribbean, we have achieved monitoring. We know exactly what to do, how to get it done. We may need to change some of our approaches, but I think we have the monitoring down pat. As it relates to evaluation, I would say that is an area that is a huge challenge for us, and we need greater capacity building in that area to conduct impactful evaluation. So, these types of organizations could help to support those areas and to foster those. Regional data sharing policy. We need to formalize and normalize data sharing within the region. This is something that, even as CARPHA, we have experienced, have different experiences in these areas, but this is something that will facilitate data sharing and the access and availability of needed information in the region to make decisions. We are still making decisions as it relates to having incomplete data, and in many times inaccurate information due to data quality. And I will mention one more, you could read them there on the screen, is also to nurture a culture of evaluative research. We need to ensure that the evaluations that are conducted are based on science and apply the, I would say, the rigor of statistics and data, and using the relevant methodologies to be able to truly provide the information that is needed and the quality of information that is needed to respond not only to development challenges or in a development response, but also as it relates to implementation of interventions that impact the lives of individuals within the Caribbean. Thank you. That was my closing statement. And even as I talked a little bit about research and marrying evaluation, research, and data and statistics, I would like to also mention that between the period of June 16th to the 19th, that CARPHA will be having its virtual 16th annual health research conference, and we would like to invite persons to participate. The theme of the conference is focused on pandemic, NCDs, and climate change, which is the Caribbean's triple threat. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Patricia. Yet again, picking up on some of the same points in relation to that culture for M&E, and certainly one of the gaps that you highlighted was that of a culture of evaluation. So certainly some of the key points that I took away were in relation to the importance of M&E. And I really like that you made the point that it is now. We're not only need to focus on post-crisis, but the time for recognizing the importance of M&E is now. You also made the point that M&E needs to be responsive now as well, and that we need to make decisions based on M&E now. So I think we got a fairly clear message there that the time for M&E is now. And I think that's a very powerful statement for us to take away, and certainly for us to think about the now. And certainly an important question you raised and went on to speak to how can M&E really help us to understand the impact of the pandemic on the development outcomes here in the Caribbean. And certainly as monitoring and evaluation professionals, this is an important question that we need to reckon with. Certainly, as you made the point that we certainly need to revisit theories of change. We need to promote evaluation practices, and this is part of the mandate, just making another CEI plug. Part of our mandate is to promote evaluation practices. You also made a very important point in relation to the use of mixed methods and visualization, etc. But just to underscore, and it is quite instructive that you brought a health perspective to this, but even coming from a health perspective, we recognize that these challenges and some of the gaps are very much the same across all sectors. So it was no surprise when you spoke to some of the gaps as it relates to technology, you know, the need for new technologies to be used, that culture of evaluation, capacities, knowledge, and skills you shared as a significant gap. Evaluative research, which I'm sure is going to spark some interesting discussion in terms of how do we use more research, more robust research methods, and you spoke to marrying research, statistics, and evaluation. And then the awareness of emerging M&E practice, which yet again coincides with the CEI mandate to ensure that new methods and approaches are in fact given prominence so that we as a region, you know, can be at the cutting edge in terms of M&E practice. And I really like the point that you made about formalizing and normalizing data sharing. I'm sure most of us from this region would agree that data sharing is something that we battle with every day in this region. Data is kept secret and hidden, and very often we are reinventing the wheel rather than accessing data. So I think that is an extremely powerful point in terms of how we can shift the needle in this region by formalizing and normalizing data sharing. So thank you very much for that. We have many takeaways, and I encourage participants to continue placing your comments, your questions in the chat. We certainly will have more than enough time to tackle them all. And that brings me to the last panelist. I'm very pleased to introduce you to Pedro Henrique Souza. Pedro has over 12 years of experience working with the United Nations in strategic planning, results monitoring, and reporting. His last assignment was with the UN Development Coordination Office, advising on data and information management related issues. He also provided technical advice to the Caribbean Regional Steering Committee and the overall implementation of the Caribbean Multi-Country Sustainable Development Framework. He also worked as M&E officer at the Resident Coordinator's Office in Brazil and Mongolia. And Pedro holds a bachelor's degree in international relations and a master's degree in human rights public policies at the University of Brasilia. Pedro, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Over to you.
Thank you, Susan. Good evening, colleagues. Greetings. It's nice to see that even though it's a little bit late, we still have full participants here. I just need a little help in sharing my screen because initially I had thought that it was working, but now when I click in the share screen button, it's not working. You need to make me a presenter.
Yes, it's saying that the host has disabled screen sharing. Can we have that rectified? I'm not able to share either. I'm getting the same message.
Hi, Pedro. Yes, I'm sorry. You're now co-host. You should be able to share at will.
Perfect. It's working now. Thank you. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, indeed.
Yes, Pedro, that's fine. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Well, first, I would like to say that I hope everyone is safe and well in difficult times that we live. It's always important to start with this type of a statement. And I'm very honored to be here and participating in this event. I believe that this kind of discussions are more and more relevant as we progress towards a more results-based management in all aspects of institutions, organizations, governments, regions as well. Well, when I was preparing my presentation, I had some concerns that maybe my presentation was a little bit out of place because I'm going to focus on a study case for UN data strategy. But as I heard the presentations and the speakers, now I realize that it's actually very aligned, and you will understand a little bit more in details later on. But I can also advance and say that the challenges that the Caribbean region faces regarding monitoring and evaluation are the same challenges that a lot of other regions that I have supported also face. And not just regions, not just countries, the UN as well. Well, I am an information management consultant. I do not work for the UN anymore. And it's important to say that because I do not speak on behalf of the organization. I added the link of the document that I'm going to present here in my presentation. And this presentation, I believe, will be shared with all of you. So later on, you can also access the same document. And if you just go on Google and type UN data strategy, you will find this document over there. And everything that I'm saying here is public. So it's not a secret to anyone. Well, let's start. First, I would like to address why I'm talking about data, right? Let's see, it's not moving. Oh, now it is. It's a little bit slow, my slide, but I'll get back. Well, as Sherlock Holmes says, data, data, data. I cannot make bricks without clay. And this, although it's from a romance and it's a fictional story, it's very much what happens today when we look into the scope of monitoring and evaluation. We need to also understand that there is no monitoring, there is no evaluation if you don't have data. And even if you have data, you need to have good quality of data to be able to carry on monitoring and evaluation duties. And most importantly, data today is a commodity that is more expensive even than oil. And the UN realized that. The UN realized how much information the institution holds and how much data the institution generates. However, this is not as cohesive as we would like to see through the entire organization. And to give a little bit of the context of why I'm talking about data strategy, UN data strategy, to be more specific, I want to look back at why this conversation started. When we created, when I say we, I mean the member states created the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda, the UN stated that the member states needed to improve the availability, timeless, and disaggregation of SDG data so that global community can identify development gaps, progress, and solutions. This is a very nice, those are very nice words, and they are very interesting to see the UN conclaiming that member states should do that. But what if we do a different exercise? What if we look back at the UN and ask the UN to provide availability, timeless, and disaggregation SDG data? If you go back to the UN and ask them to provide it, or even if you ask the UN to provide realistic figures of how much the entire UN system invests on sustainable development, or even humanitarian action, or peace and security, or human rights for that matter, you will not find that information very easily. If you ask the UN to provide information on how much the entire UN system is expanding in your own country, in Jamaica, in Barbados, in Guyana, in Suriname, where they have this UN systems functioning, it's also not going to be very easy to find that information. Even if you are looking to budget and expenditures, simple figures as budget and expenditures is not that easy. But please don't take me wrong. I'm not saying that the UN does not have data. I'm not saying that the data is not there. It's just that the way that is produced and shared with the public and even inside the UN is not very cohesive. You have great institutions like UNICEF, for example, that they have an amazing work with data because they do deal with donors on a daily basis. They do have to show to their donors, and for UNICEF specifically, it's not just the governments, it's also the general population, that they are doing with the money that they are being donored, they are transforming the reality of children all over the world. So it's an institution that for us, even inside the UN, is very transparent. There are a lot of data everywhere. It's easy to access. It's not just about putting the information in your website. The information is also user-friendly. You can go over there at any time and you'll find a lot of sources of data in their website. So what happened is that the UN started to look into examples of institutions that are doing that are achieving good results in managing data, and to compare with the overall structure of the organization, what is missing? Why are we so much behind in terms of data quality and data management quality? If you look in this graphic, for example, it's a comparison between what the UN does in terms of data management and what the World Bank does. And you will see that the World Bank, for example, this is just one example. It's one organization that is much more advanced than the average UN system worldwide. That's because although we produce a lot of data, we do not share it transparently. The systems that we have are outdated. They are not connected enough. They are not accessible enough. There is no harmonization in data. Imagine that, for example, you are producing a report for UNICEF, and then there is a WHO report where they show conflicting data, for example. Why is this happening in 2021 when everything should be somehow linked and we should have this interoperability between the different UN agencies? And because of these questions, because of these concerns, because of this realization that the UN ecosystem is not advanced enough, the Secretary General in 2018 decided that it was time for the UN to create a data strategy. And to create a data strategy, not only the UN was looking to examples like the World Bank and UNICEF, but also examples that comes from governments. And I believe that by looking at those examples, we were able to find, I mean, the UN back then, were able to find good practices that nowadays can be used by other countries, other regions as well. For example, we looked into more than 15 examples of countries in their documents on data strategy: Australia, Canada, Dubai, and so on. We tried to find a common element of all those documents to see what was the best example, and we found that Canada was the one. When I say we, I mean when I was working for the UN. Now we is separate, and I have to change that. I have to get used to not saying we anymore. But the UN realized that Canada was one of the countries that would have a better data strategy, the best data strategy that was available. And even if you look into Canada, for example, you will see that the column for funding is missing. So as I told you in the beginning, the UN system and even other countries are facing similar challenges than Caribbean countries are facing in terms of funding, for example. Even today, after the creation in 2020 was launched the UN data strategy, and even after 2 years of this entire cumbersome process of creating a data strategy for all 50 UN entities there is, we still have a document that do not address funding. So if you look into those examples and best practices, you will see common advices or recommendations that can inspire other countries to carry out the creation of their own data strategy. For example, it's important to analyze the organization's current state of data literacy. It's not just about having data, it's about looking to the organization and making sure that everybody understands the data that the organization is providing. It's also important to look into the future and to imagine what is the data ecosystem that we want for the organization. And this was one of the most difficult ones because each of the participating agencies had a different view of what the future holds. And that's because there are a lot of advancements coming from those organizations. There is innovative ways of collecting data. There is big data. You have artificial intelligence. being used in UN projects. You have machine learning also being used in UN projects. You have real-time data monitoring. You have satellite images. You have mobile technology. You have behavior insights. So all those organizations had a different understanding of where we wanted to go. And with that, they also needed to create and to identify priority themes for their data strategy. And especially because there is a timeline for the implementation of this strategy, it's meant to be implemented by 2030. The organization needs to identify the priorities that would be addressing in these next 10 years. And it came up with a list of 7 actually use cases that I will show you later. Another important thing is finding those use cases for the data integration through the organization. There are some common areas that all the UN entities and agencies, programs, funding, they have that we need to address them by 2030. It's not possible to create something that it's holistic, that it's comprehensive, that it's cohesive, if you don't target the low-hanging fruits first. And looking to those hanging fruits and looking to the data ecosystem that we have an understanding that it's beyond the culture of collecting data. It's beyond the principles, the systems, the data sets, the structure. It's all of that. And it's all of that integrated. It doesn't matter if you have a good infrastructure, if you don't have people that it's qualified to analyze the data that you are collecting. It doesn't matter if you have some goals, but you don't have an overall framework to be placed to compare the data across the decade, for example. And more importantly, this data ecosystem needs to have some characteristics that carry out the principles of the UN, such as being user-friendly, being flexible enough. This data ecosystem needs to be governed by stewards, and there are different stewards for this. It needs to be transparent, it needs to be interoperable, and it needs to be secure. Well, the UN then created...
1 minute.
Sorry?
1 minute.
Thank you. The UN then created this strategy that is composed by its vision, by its outcomes. There are 7 outcomes in the document. You can all have a look at it and find more detail about this. The document is very well structured. It's easy to read. There are 12 principles listed and 6 use priority cases in the overall scope of the document. And this is how they all connected to each other. And as Patricia was saying, it's important to spend time in strengthening the capabilities of analytics, of data management. And it's important also to create this roadmap of where we want to go and how we want to get there. That's why from the data strategy, you can see a list of actions and including, for example, strengthening capacity for people, for the people that work with the UN, for the people that, for our partners, is strengthening partnerships and so on. I'm passing fast here, but you can have a look at this later. I just want to finish saying that this strategy is to be implemented by 2030. And there are some things that we can learn from this experience of the UN creating this document. First of all, and this is my last line, a new approach on data is imperative to be able to deliver the 2030 agenda. Without understanding the importance of data, we will not deliver the goals. The creation of data strategy is cumbersome, for sure. It took 2 years for the UN with 50 entities, with 15 countries collaborating to create this strategy, but it's rewarding and it demands a high-level political commitment. The Secretary General himself wants to see this through and is all the time demanding progress on the implementation of the strategy. It also needs to be long-term commitment in order to make transformational improvements. We do not hope that in 5 years this will be implemented. We see this going forward 20 years forward. And it's important always to start with the low-hanging fruits. There are numerous examples of good practices on data use and data management and creating this ecosystem. We just need to address those that are easy to deliver first to create this movement towards a more cohesive data ecosystem. Thank you, everyone. And I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much, Pedro, and certainly for reminding us about the critical importance of data. As you said, there's no M&E without good quality data at the end of the day. And that data is, as you put it, more important than oil in terms of the value of data. It was indeed very useful to learn from you in terms of the challenges that the UN system has faced, particularly in terms of harmonization and accessibility in particular. These are very much real challenges, as you would have heard, that we face in this region, along with others, but certainly those two, particularly in terms of sharing data, those are real challenges for us. But I wanted to just thank you for your insights in terms of that data ecosystem, and in particular, how you captured, the key pieces of that ecosystem, the people, the infrastructure, the data sets, the culture, the frameworks, the principles, and of course the system is at the core of that. I think very often we forget, that all these important pieces make up a robust data system. And of course we took, and I certainly paid strong attention to what we can learn from this, because I think you've given us so much to take away in terms of the new approaches that need to be taken with respect to data, and to remind ourselves that data is important. It's valuable for so many different reasons. You spoke about the need for high-level political commitment, and as the ambassador spoke to that in her opening contribution, that the CARICOM has bought into this wholeheartedly, and the heads of government have done so. So we are hoping that this pays enormous dividends for us as a region. Your point about the long-term commitment is very well taken. This is not a one-shot. We need to keep pressing on. We need to, as CEI, keep flying the flag, and certainly to keep underscoring the value of good quality data. And by all means to ensure that we tackle the low-hanging fruits and don't try to go for the big wins too early on in the process. So thank you so much, Pedro. Certainly, I think your presentation has really pulled together quite instructively, the big elephant of data, and the importance of having good quality data when we talk about M&E, because at the end of the day, there's no M&E, as you said, without data. That said, thank you all for your contributions. Ambassador, Kervyn Tobias, Patricia, and Pedro, thank you so much for your contributions. And we will move now to question and answers. We have quite a lot going on in the chat. Our participants have been quite active. And we'll also ask anyone who has a question to raise their hand, and we will give you an opportunity to speak. Okay, so could we start with the first one? The first question that I am seeing here is for Kervyn. Can you share some more on your experience on the collection of data during COVID-19? Was a digital data collection system in place pre-COVID? This continues to be a challenge, especially with project monitoring on the back burner, especially with national attention on the response to COVID.
Yes, thanks for that, Susan. Yes, so in terms of the data collection and, well, COVID was unexpected. So we almost just went into reactive mode, actually started discussing strategies, what could we do to collect the data. And obviously this would have needed greater participation in the member states at the member states levels to really forge stronger relationships with at least one person at the member state who would do the walking, the legwork for us, so to speak. So that was done. Additionally, we sought the approval of donors so that we could actually do the verification over the phone rather than examining, in place of, I should say, examining physical documents. In our countries, the use of automated systems, and we have two projects. One is the HIV/TB elimination project. We have a juvenile justice project, and the use of automated systems is non-existent. A lot of these, the data would be in files, in logbooks, record books. So we even went as far as obtaining scanned copies where necessary to verify, calling more than one person so that you have a secondary person verifying that the data is accurate. But it's something that we still working on. Again, with as I presented, it gave us the opportunity to sort of highlight the need for automating where we can and as soon as we can, so that we don't have to deal with the whole issue of the books records not being updated. People who are out of office, so then and the books would be in their desk or on their desk in a dip, that sort of thing. So so we highlighted that. I think it's catching on because we have been recently, in the beginning it was a challenge, but recently we have been getting better feedback, better cooperation from the member states. You know, the panic is over, so then people more or less settled into the new reality and you know, being agile, starting to look at new ways of assisting us or facilitating our data collection, our verification, and also vigorously pursuing and supporting our research, our initiatives into going into getting more automated systems. But it's a work in progress.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you. I have a question that I want to direct to you, Ambassador. A lot of training has been undertaken in the region on RBM and M&E, and you would have shared a lot of what has been done by CARICOM in this regard. Why is there still a deficiency of M&E skills in the region? Is that really the primary problem? Sorry, we're not hearing you, Ambassador. Not hearing you. Still not hearing you.
And your mic is on. Is there a lost connection?
Not sure. We were getting a lot of static when Ambassador was trying to speak. I don't know if there's a technical difficulty.
Okay,
she's
go
muted.
ahead. Try now. Oh, still not hearing. Is your mic on?
Okay, well, while the ambassador seeks to resolve that, we'll go to another question and come back to the ambassador. So we'll stick a pin on that one because there's a follow-up question in terms of the externally driven piece. But Patricia, perhaps you can also weigh in on the issue that was raised in terms of lessons learned from getting commitments from government leadership to agree that an evaluation culture is essential, not just for funders, but to learn about the progress of national and regional development. So have you got any lessons that you can share with us in terms of that?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay. I had to join again. I went out and I joined again. So, but
okay.
You asked a question to someone else, so maybe the person can answer first and then I'll answer the question that you asked me. Is that fine?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Over to you, Patricia.
Thank you. You can hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. So as it relates to lessons learned, if I'm correct, in
getting commitments from governments, government leadership to
governments.
to agree that an evaluation culture is essential, not just for funders, but to learn about the progress in national and regional development. And in your case, within the health sector in particular, I would imagine.
Yes. So I don't want to say, I almost feel I don't want to say we have it a little bit easier in the health sector, but that may be presumptuous of me to say that. But lessons that we've learned, and I will say many lessons over the years, and we have always, I would say, have had support at the level of policymakers. And I'm saying the level of policymakers at the highest level. So as it relates to the ministers who are part of the Council of Social and Health Ministers, the COSAD within the CARICOM community, at that level, but also at the level of their technical advisors, who are the chief medical officers of health, and other persons within, I would say, at the national level of the countries, and also the CARICOM institutions and key persons at various regional institutions. I think we've also had support of development partners as it relates to understanding the importance of evaluation. We're seeing a culture of evaluation, but to be honest, I don't think we are quite there yet. A culture of evaluation. We speak of a culture of M&E, and we always have the tendency to say M&E or to reference M&E as one, but monitoring is a function of itself and of its own, and evaluation is a different function. And I think we need to, I don't want to say move away from that, but in a practical way, we need to somehow separate the function of monitoring from the function of evaluation. So as it relates to evaluation, we have executed and have had support to conduct evaluations, even evaluation of the Caribbean Corporation in Health that helps to inform the new Caribbean Corporation in Health and the new strategies. And we've had the evaluation of CARPHA as an institution. So there are policymakers who understand the importance of evaluation, but to say regionally, we have a culture of evaluation, I don't believe that we are quite there yet. We need to establish and build and nurture a culture of evaluation, of sound empirical evaluation, but we are not there yet.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Patricia. And Ambassador, let me pose the question again. A lot of training has been undertaken in the region on RBM, as you would have shared, and there's been a lot in M&E. Why is there still a deficiency of monitoring and of evaluation skills in the region? Is that the primary problem that we're facing?
Okay, thank you. I hope you can hear me now. I'll share some experiences that we had from the CARICOM Secretariat side. For our phase 1, we approached the CDB for the sensitization awareness sessions, and we got the money. So when we went for phase 2 to conduct training, which is included in phase 2, the CDB said no. And one of the reasons was that they have been conducting training sessions since the 1990s, I think 1996 or 1997, to all the CARICOM member states. Now, when we went in the member states, you had hardly, maybe in one country, 1 or 2 persons, who went to that training sessions, or you have people, yes, they went there, but they're not practicing it. Okay, so it's all lost. And the turnover within ministries, it's very high. People do not remain in certain positions for a long time. So, if we do not have a continuous training, you will lose people. You will really lose people. And even those who are there, they need the upgrading because, anything changes in time and so on. So you have to refresh and those things. And another thing is also we are duplicating and triplicating a lot. And I'm going to give you another example. We have the CRLG, and with assistance from the World Bank, we will train people. And I also mentioned we want to have curricula and so on because we want to have professionals. The reason being why we want to have a network. We do not continuously want to uphold our hands for the World Bank. Please, we need technical assistance and so on. We want to have a cadre of professionals in our region, in a network that all member states can go to and rely upon, instead of continuously going outside of the region. So that is what we want to establish. But what we recently also discovered is we from the secretariat, we asked our IDP to assist us with training and so on. Okay, I was then asked to attend a session by a certain UN agency to find out that a person from another ministry, from a member state, also represented in the CRLG, that they are now having training sessions from a UN agency. That is duplication. There is another member state approached another regional organization, and they are dealing with RBM. And at the end, I'm asking myself, but my dear goodness, what are we doing? What are we doing? We are not spending the money wisely. Because, and another thing, the silo approach, it's not only region-wide, but it's also in member states. Because what I found out when that UN agency, what the UN agency is doing within a certain ministry in that member state, people don't talk to each other, not even within a department. Now, who is talking about cross ministries or cross departments? These are some real issues, right, that we really have to deal with in our member states, internally in ministries, and also at the regional level. We do not talk to each other. Or if we talk, we don't listen. Or maybe we should not be talking, we should be communicating, actively communicating, right? Because you can talk, if people don't listen to you, it's no use, okay? So, but these are some of the issues. I mean, the money then that is coming from the other agency, you can use it for something else. But that is not what's happening. So we're duplicating, we're triplicating, and when you go then again and you really need money, there is no money. But there is something else from the IDP side, because we from the CARICOM Secretariat, we constantly also ask our IDPs, please share the information with what you are doing in member states or with regional institutions, but you're not getting the information. Everything is such a secret. So that's another big issue, right? I don't know why we're so secretive, but it's really and truly not helping the region. We are wasting a lot of human resources, a lot of monies, and we can spend it much better. So
Yes.
that is my experience that I can share with you. And these are not experiences that are 20 years old. These are really recent, right? Really recent. We really have to conduct our business differently.
Absolutely.
One hand needs to know what the other hand is doing. You mentioned about the culture of M&E and so on. It's not yet a culture. It is not. We are afraid of being evaluated. We are afraid of being monitored, right? And especially at certain levels, when it comes to finances, I don't have to tell you what the situation is. Okay? Individuals are really, it's not being scared, but it's being secretive. You don't want that the public at large, you know, it's being revealed of what is really happening, because then you have to answer questions, right? So, and that's the big issue. And if we don't tackle these things, you know, I mean, we will not make progress. We will really not make progress if we do not get rid of this so-called being scared of revealing information and so on. So that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And I think in your response, you also tackled another question that we had where one participant said data availability due to limited data sharing is a significant challenge in the region. How can we promote data sharing as a way of advancing the development of the region as opposed to a blame game? And what I understood from what you said is that we have too much secrecy, too much silos, which leads to great duplication. And we really need to look at that in terms of even the role of the IDPs in data sharing, rather than this fear of sharing information or, you know, holding information close to our chest. That we really need to break down some of those barriers if we want to meaningfully advance the development of this region. So thank you very much for that response, Ambassador. I have a question for Pedro, and I see, Pedro, you have your hand up, so you have the floor in a minute. The question was with respect to the role of governments in the creation of data ecosystems. What is the role of governments in creating these ecosystems that you referred to?
Thank you, Susan. Well, let me just go back. I will address this question, but let me just go back to the point and the question that was raised for Patricia, because I believe there are some learning that I have been doing in this past 12 years working for the UN that is worth sharing with everyone. I have the opportunity to sit down with 12 different governments to discuss UN reports and evaluation reports. And it doesn't matter what government I was sitting with, the reaction is always was always the same. The word evaluation itself, it's the government's representatives, they were afraid of the word evaluation because it was looking like we were assessing their capacity, that we were assessing their performance. And that was not the point. We wanted to understand if the projects were successful or not, if they were able to deliver results. So over this 12 years working, I see a cultural change in the UN in the way that we address monitoring and evaluation. If you look into the current UN documents, you will hardly find those words anymore. We are changing that understanding, because monitoring and evaluation, they are processes. And those processes, they aim a result. And the result of those two processes to show that there are results to talk about. There are results, or maybe the results are not there and maybe we need to change something in the process, but we need to address the results. So the cultural change that I have seen is that UN is adopting, instead of calling monitoring evaluation, we are calling results reporting, because then the government wants to sit down with you and show what they are capable of. they're not as afraid of being assessed or evaluated. So this is something very interesting that I have seen over these years. And to address your question about how the governments, what are the roles of those governments in creating this data ecosystem? Well, the UN data ecosystem is one thing, but each government have its own data ecosystem. If you have information on census, if you have information on social programs, if you have information on health status, all of that is part of your data ecosystem. What you need to do is look into what you have and to see if that's efficient, if that is working for you. And if you are not duplicating work, as Ambassador just mentioned, sometimes you are just duplicating the work. Sometimes what you need to do is transform the way that you look data in a way that is less cumbersome and more efficient, not just for you who is collecting the data, but for those who are receiving and being the audience and beneficiaries of that data process.
Thank you very much, Pedro. Okay, well, with the 10 minutes we have left, I wanted to throw a question to our panelists, starting with Kervyn. What strategy would you suggest to respond to changing governments and changing focus? I'm sure you see this in the OECS region pretty often, different approaches to accountability and transparency. Anything from your experience that you would suggest?
Yes, yes, and I think in terms of the transparency, and that could go back to the question on data. While I worked in the government of St. Lucia, one initiative that we successfully implemented was the open data, an open data project, where public data or data that is easily accessible by the public by going into a government department has been placed on a website available to all, and it makes research much easier. It makes persons wishing to interrogate data, they have it at hand, and it's much easier to get. That required a policy at the national level to govern that, and once that was in place, I mean, it was just a matter of having agencies comply, because initially there was the resistance. Everybody wants to hold on to their data, so that was that change. Once the policy was in place, passed by cabinet, I mean, there was no argument. It's, you comply. And I think since then there has been the sort of change, even in terms of areas where departments, government agencies were charging for access to data, because the charge would be, well, to make a copy, for example. So to get a copy, you pay a certain charge. Then that went down the window. So then that source of revenue, they had to be more creative in terms of how they generate revenue. I think something like that sort of opens the door for the transparency from the OECS standpoint. And that's where we stress the aspect of showing benefits to member states, to take it from the positive angle. We're not doing monitoring, we're not doing evaluation to bring out a whip and stick, but rather to be able to give you something that you could boast about in terms of achievements, and hopefully taking this approach that they can see the benefits, then it would encourage the whole movement towards being more transparent, towards supporting M&E more and adopting it for their own national purposes.
Okay, thank you. Patricia, anything you would like to share on that in terms of strategies you would suggest to respond to changing governments and focus, different approaches to accountability and transparency?
Thank you. I smiled when you asked this question because, and I will say from my experience of working in M&E in the Caribbean region for August will be 8 years. The Caribbean, as it relates to transparency and monitoring and evaluation, I believe this has to be addressed first at the level of legislation and then at the level of policy. And I start with legislation because, to my knowledge, I could recall one country, one Caribbean country that addresses data or information sharing in their legislation. And I know this personally because of engaging with that member state in providing M&E technical assistance and receiving, having access to data will be considered confidential. And as a result of that legislation, having to sign a confidentiality agreement with that member state because that legislation existed. That is not something that is common within the Caribbean region. Like I said, I could only recall one member state. And I don't want to call any names. I do recall another member state who at the policy level was had developed and drafted a data sharing policy with the intent of taking it to cabinet for approval. So for we to truly create change and to really address transparency, I believe we must first address data and information sharing at the legislative level to ensure that it is represented there, that is spoken of there, because I think that contributes a lot to can we share this information? Can we not share this information? Even though it doesn't have any identifiers, if we share it with X, Y, and Z entities, what happens next? Are they allowed to share it? We have concerns about the interpretation of the data that we share, and in some cases, misrepresentation. So those are some of the things that has to be considered, but mainly at the higher level. Thank you.
Ambassador, could we ask you to weigh in on this?
Thank you very much.
4 minutes more.
Yeah, legislation, policy, important, but you need the political will. If you don't have the political will, don't have political commitment, don't have political dedication, you can forget it. Okay? And even if you have legislation on paper, but it's not ratified, you cannot implement it, another government comes, it's wasted. So that's, but I think if we take a positive approach towards monitoring, evaluation, towards data sharing, a positive approach, what have we achieved? How good are we? That type of approach, revenue income through sharing of data. That is one side of the coin. The other side is when it comes to having the data and sharing it, again, the public component. And that is where the scary part is. Okay? Once it's open for the public, whether they have to pay or not, accountability and responsibility kicks in. And questions will be asked. And are they ready to answer the questions? Okay, so, but in my concept, if you take a positive approach and maybe demand from the public at large that we need this, I think might bring some change in the region. But otherwise, I don't see a change coming. Really and truly, will, dedication is very important. Because today I'm in the opposition, tomorrow I can be there. Or today who is in the coalition, tomorrow you're not forever in a position. You change, right? So it will benefit both. But often we don't think like that. We think I'm here and I will be here forever. So I don't want it. And it comes and it haunts us. So these are some of these sensitive issues. But I think public demand, that is where the change might come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We just have 1 minute more. Pedro, in 30 seconds, do you have any views on this coming from a UN and more international perspective?
I think Ambassador already addressed it very well on the topic. And the only addition that I have to make actually is a reinforcement of what she said, is that It's not just about changing the culture of the government. It's not just about changing how the data holders understand the importance of monitoring and evaluation. We also need to invest in changing the culture of the data consumers. We need to have a society that is driven by data, a society that understands and are able to understand that data, process it, analyze it, make predictions, tell if the government is doing right or wrong, or if it's going to the right path or not. So changing society, it's also a crucial part of this data M&E transformation.
Thank you very much. Okay, it's now 8 p.m. and I want to end by thanking our 4 very, very distinguished panelists for your enormous contribution to this session, and more particularly to a very, very interesting discussion on the issue of demand and support for M&E in the Caribbean context. This was day 1 of a series of discussions that the CEI are facilitating for gLOCAL, as I mentioned during my introduction. And I think that this has really capped off day 1 in an excellent fashion. So thank you very much for your various contributions. Thank you to our audience and participants who have kept the chat quite busy and have been weighing in and certainly adding their own contributions to the discussion. Please look out for tomorrow's session, which will focus on innovative approaches to monitoring and evaluation in the Caribbean region, again at 6 p.m. Eastern Caribbean time. And that session will be moderated by our first Vice President, Dr. Lenise Baptiste, and we will have presentations from the Commonwealth of Learning, as well as Empowerment Evaluator from Ohio in terms of the Domestic Violence Network, and the Community Renewal Project from the Planning Institute of Jamaica. So we have quite a lot to look forward to tomorrow. So participants, we look forward to you joining us again tomorrow. Thank you very much on behalf of the President and board members of the Caribbean Evaluators Institute for being part of today's session. Have a great evening, everyone, and good night.
Have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.